I am unashamed. What about you?
It's one of the few jobs in life. Why don't you just start right here? It's one of the few jobs in life that literally anyone can do. Name that job.
It was not podcasting.
Weather people, predicting the weather. Because it doesn't matter if you're right. They just
Well, they're usually wrong, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that your experiences?
Well, they were wrong on this rainfall, Al. The weather has turned. And that's why we have another exciting episode of the Unashamed podcast.
You got the fire, toasty fire behind you. Yeah.
Hey, that's the first thing I said when I came in. I was like, "Oh, I'm glad we have a fire in the background." But now you realize why we have the fire.
86 degrees up here. It's 86 behind me. I'm freezing.
86 degrees.
86 and you're freezing.
I'm not getting that joke.
I don't.
No, I've got my thermostat set to 86 and it's still cold in here.
Well, that's embarrassing.
Yeah.
You've lost your manhood.
You need an HVAC guy, Zach.
I don't think it's working. Is what I'm saying. It's not about me not having the tolerance. It's about it's not putting out enough hot air.
That was the joke. I was wondering. I knew somewhere in there. But see, now you know why we actually have the fire after the fire bit.
Mm-hmm.
We had the whole fire episode a couple episodes ago.
We're people who stare at fires. But are you doing it thinking about the resurrection, or are you doing it thinking about all the ways you have not done the right thing? You see, it's a pretty good thought.
Well, I told you we had it was a kind of a old folks camp down here, retreat. Bill and Hawk and our Aunt Ann, Jase, were down. And so everybody, it's interesting because like Lisa and our friend Bill had prostate cancer. And ever since he's had this treatment, he's cancer free now, which is great. But he, just whatever meds they put on some trial on, he gets hot flashes. So he's going through male menopause. He's like an old woman. And so he and Lisa are hot flashing. Aunt Ann's like mom. She's got 14 blankets on it. It's just every time you walk in, somebody's burning up and somebody's freezing. It's like, I don't know. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And it's just normal. I mean, it's cool down here. It's 63, feels like 55. Took them to the beach yesterday.
All the people in the north are like, wow.
It's cold.
So you're in the first stages of some form of hypothermia.
I'm like, whoa, it's crisp this morning.
Al, next time you go to the beach, you're going to have to wear pants.
That's right.
Possibly a light jacket.
I wore shorts yesterday, Jason. I was like, man, I gotta start dressing for the occasion. It's cold down here.
So funny. We're all in our own little world. That's why I was upset about the weatherman, because we don't have any water, because the river is below what it normally is, which is kind of a controversial thing on why that is, and no one will give a clear answer. They said they were working on the lock and dam system, but that was about 3 years ago. So it's like, where are we at on that project? So
didn't they raise it to begin with for barge traffic? Wasn't that the purpose of? Yeah.
Yeah. I think the root of it is money. Yeah. But the problem is we can't pump out of the river to pump our duck hole. So we got this nice front today. And you're like, you should be getting ducks on your property. But unless we can talk some ducks into lighting on dry land, we may have a problem this year. So I was a little disappointed because they were calling for heavy rains, heavy. That's a Phil impersonation.
So if Dad were around, Jase, would he not be trying to pump water onto it? Is that y'all just not going to do that? Because of the
he would basically. Well, if you get to this stage, then you would. I mean, everything's doable, depending on how much money you want to spend.
Right,
but
I got you.
I'm not spending 6 figures on getting some water out there.
I know,
because that's about what it would take. And so, but I could see Phil. I thought about him this morning because he would he heard the weather report, it's going to rain. I can see he'd rub his hands together like, they coming. And then this morning, he would have awakened and it's like, what happened to all that weather, that rain? I mean, it's cold, but wasn't much of a rain phenomenon. So then he would say, boy, I tell you, he'd unleash his frustrations out on weathermen. So,
and that's usually when you get a call from Dad when something like that does. And he had something on his mind about that. And he would just have the conversation as if we'd been talking about it all day. And then he's just, yep, bah, and he's off the phone.
Yeah, he would not be happy. Well, that reminds me, I promised to go through 1 Samuel 8 like 2 weeks ago. What happened? So only our everyday listeners will remember that, probably all the new listeners, because we're in John 18 and we have this interesting dynamic about the kingdom comes up.
Yeah.
This discussion. Pilate's like, are you a king? He's like, Jesus, my kingdom is not from this place. And we kind of talked about that conversation. I'm not sure where we landed on that, but I don't think Pilate was taking him very serious. He was looking at him like, because he knows where he's from. I'm sure he had already heard about this going on out there, but he's from the wrong part of town. He has no money. He has no army. He has no home. He's doing a lot of good things socially and bringing people together, but to say that you're a king, I just have to think that he thought, yeah, he's got some mental disorders here. So I promised to kind of give you the history of that, or how we got here, you know?
Right. I definitely want you to do that because I think that's interesting. And today we get into this Barabbas thing too, because that's right up there in the text. Before you do that, Jase, I want to give a little shout out to our good friends at Family Research Council. That's Tony Perkins' organization up in Washington. They have been frontliners for a long time in terms of everything we believe about God and about, why our country was founded. So they're kind of the frontline people in D.C. I want you guys at Unashamed Nation to check them out. If you want to help them out, you can give to that frc.org/unashamed.
So First Samuel 8, that's where you're at.
Well, to appreciate 1 Samuel 8, I want to read something out of Deuteronomy 17 concerning the laws, and y'all can help me give the history of that, which is a really interesting read, but because he's kind of going through what being the nation representing God as Israel is supposed to look like. So there's various laws in here, which when I was reading kind of the background of this, the first paragraph of Deuteronomy 17 is really interesting. And you see this brought up in the New Testament, talking about establishing testimony based on 2 or 3 witnesses. What I found fascinating, I never noticed this before I get to the point about the king. In verse 6 of Deuteronomy, it says, on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, a person is to be put to death. And I found this interesting because here we are, they're accusing Jesus, and I realize the Jews have now handed him over to Roman authority because they're wanting Rome to kill him.
Right.
But it's like, how are you going to come up with some witnesses over a man who's never done anything wrong? and based on their law, you kind of see why they're doing it. This is just a side point, but I thought it was really interesting because I didn't realize in their law, watch where this goes. In verse 6 of Deuteronomy, it says, but no one is to be put to death on the testimony of only one witness, which is interesting.
Yeah.
You think about our system today, you got one witness, that may be enough. But they wanted 2 or 3, but watch the next catch to it in verse 7. The hands of the witnesses must be the first in putting that person to death. I thought, that's an interesting law. So it's like, not only are you going to be the witness, you have to participate in the sentencing, which puts
you throw the first rock.
which puts your testimony to the test. It's kind of like if you really saw this.
You got skin in the game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Real skin in the game. Hey, if any of you are ready to own a home, listen to what I'm going to tell you. I've bought a lot of properties over the years, bought and sold homes. It's been super important for us and honestly been one of the best vehicles of building out our wealth is through the homes that we've lived in. If you feel like you're ready to buy, I'm telling you the time to act is now, because for the first time in years, buyers actually have the upper hand because there's more inventory on the market than there has been in a long time, which means that you have more power in negotiation, and it means less competition. But opportunities like this won't last long. As soon as the feds cut the rates, buyer demand is likely to spike, and you know what that means. Prices will go up and sellers will have the advantage. Peak home buying season is in full swing, so now's your moment to lock in the right home for you and do it on your terms before the market shifts. Reach out today and get approved for mortgage financing with my friends Andrew and Todd at andrewandtodd.com or call 888-888-1172. I met Andrew and Todd at a worship event in Monroe, Louisiana. These guys are the real deal. They love Jesus, which I love. These are the guys I trust. With 40 years of experience, they really are the experts, and they make it easy because they keep everything in-house. Call 888-888-1172 or go to andrewandtodd.com. That's andrewandtodd.com.
Because you would have to live. That's a good point, Jase, because you have to then live with this, which is interesting that in our context of what we're talking about here, these Jewish leaders, they don't want to be the one to kill Jesus. And then Pilate, who has the authority to do it, he doesn't want to be the way. He's like, this guy hasn't done anything wrong. So it's like you see, nobody wants to be the guy when it comes to Jesus.
Well, yeah, and the reason I brought it up, because I read all the accounts, which Barabbas is in all 4 accounts.
Yeah.
But one of the accounts, I'll have to look it up and figure out which one, but it's in there. Trust me. It's either, let's see, I wrote these down somewhere. But one of them where Pilate, he brings out some water and washes his hands and says, for the record,
Yeah.
I wash my hands of this man's guilt or innocence. So, and he declares that he's innocent. He's like, I'm saying there's no basis for a charge. So, anyway, going from there, my point is in Deuteronomy 17, they have this rule or prediction about a king, because at this point, they don't have a king, right?
Right.
But he addresses said potential king, which is going to be interesting when we get to 1 Samuel 8, which is the birthplace of Israel having a king. So listen to this. This is Deuteronomy 17:14. When you enter the land the Lord God is giving you and have taken possession of it and settled in it, and you say, let us set a king over us like all the nations around us. This prediction comes true when we get to 1 Samuel 8. Be sure to appoint over you a king the Lord your God chooses. That's a key little phrase there. He must be from among your fellow Israelites. Do not place a foreigner over you, one who is not an Israelite. The king, moreover, must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself. This is the part I really want to zero in on. Of course, we're like, oh, what's the big deal, a bunch of horses? Well, the horses is symbolic of, it's our modern day warships. This is the power. You got a bunch of horses and a bunch of fighters, or make the people return to Egypt to get more of them. It's like whoever has the most horses back there has the most power.
Yep.
Get it? Horsepower.
Yeah. I got it.
Good one.
I did that off the top of my head, Zach.
That was good. That was good.
So look,
You see what he did there, Zach?
You're not. You're not to go back.
But if you have to explain it, though, Jase, you kind of ruined the
I
joke.
thought that was the joke. Y'all never even broke a smile. So then it says, verse 17, he must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. I mean, now we're going back to what was set up in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 here, the ideal, because what happens with people in power? Well, they do whatever they want. But watch how this works.
Well, and also, Jase, that was a huge way in ancient days of political alliances was taking a wife from another country, and Then all of a sudden it's like you had a vassal, and so that it became a lot about political alliance too.
Yeah, and you're basically, once you get in power, you're breeding your own ancestry, you know, kind of with a godlike complex. But then it says, and he must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. I mean, just think about this. What do you have here? You have power, sex, and money. Well, what do people do as far as the earthly kingdom? What do they pursue? Those are the three.
That's
big
what they
things.
said. Yeah, power, sex, and money.
The Bible all of a sudden seems way more relevant. Something in Deuteronomy seems like, oh, well, yeah, okay. Not much has changed here. So then it says, when he takes the throne of his kingdom. Now here's what the proper king, he shouldn't do that. Don't get into money, sex, or earthly power as far as defining your kingdom. I think this is hilarious. Here's what you should do. When he takes the throne of his kingdom, he is to write for himself on a scroll a copy of this law, taken from that of the Levitical priests. It is to be with him, and he is to read it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to revere the Lord his God and follow carefully all the words of this law and these decrees, and not consider himself better than his fellow Israelites, and turn from the law to the right or to the left. Then he and his descendants will reign a long time over his kingdom in Israel. Just think that had to be read. He's like, go in your room and you read this thing, meditate on it, and do what the Lord wants you to do. It's good advice for if you want to have a king. This is what it should
And
look
what you know is interesting, Jase, when you study the kings, all the different ones in Israel, there were periods of time as it got worse and worse, especially in North Israel when they split, where they didn't even know where the law was. Like somebody would find a copy of it. It'd been like 3 kings didn't even know there was a law. So, you know, they definitely did not heed what God told them to do.
I've got in my Bible, I've got at the end of, I believe, 2 Kings, I've got a little chart I made just to look at the two, because, you know, to your point, the kingdom divided. So you have Israel and Judah, and that once the kingdom divides. And I wrote down, I literally went through every single king, and I wrote their name down. So if they were a king of either Judah or Israel, I wrote their names down, and then beside it, I wrote whether the Bible said they were evil or not. And every single king of Israel was evil, and almost every one of them in Judah was evil. And even the ones in Judah that were good, like David, I mean, he wasn't that good. You know what I mean? It's kind of like
problem.
he had problems. In fact, I'm looking at it right now. In Judah, I've got, well, you got the United Kingdom. There was 3 kings in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
The first one, or 4, Saul, evil, unknown. It didn't say that the second one. David was righteous. Solomon actually ended evil. Then you go Judah. When the kingdom splits, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 righteous. The rest of them says they're evil, and everyone in Israel was evil.
Yeah. All 20 plus. Yeah, that is not good.
But they demanded a king.
Well, right. So you get to Samuel, and Samuel's interesting. He's probably, I don't know how many other biblical characters are revered in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, but Samuel is. Yeah. And he was a prophet, a judge, and a priest. And that was kind of the model they were going. They had the judges to settle these disputes and all this.
He was the last of that group. You're right, Jase.
So I think this is interesting where this is going, because when you get to 1 Samuel 8, it says, and you have this other aspect of this as far as the legacy, and we were talking about Phil earlier, and passing down, you know, to your firstborn or to your kids, the legacy you're leaving. And that's what created the problem here, which then resulted in having a king, because when you start reading in 1 Samuel 8, when Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as Israel's leaders. Well, that sounds great, but there was a problem with that. And you see what it is. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second, Abijah, and they served at Beersheba, but his sons did not follow his ways.
Yeah.
So we have a problem here, because it's like, well, that's who's supposed to be leading us, but they didn't have the character that Samuel did. They turned aside after dishonest gain and accepted bribes and perverted justice. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel. They said, "You are old, and your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us like all the other nations have." So that's why I read the Deuteronomy 17. Well, that turned out to be a prophetic thing, because this is what's happening now. And the Lord said, listen to all, I skipped this part, verse 6. But when they said, "Give us a king to lead us," this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord told him, "Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king." This is the Lord talking here. So, as they have done from the day I brought them out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods. I mean, you remember the story of the golden calf, all this. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly and let them know what the king who will reign over them will claim as his rights.
So when Jill and I first got married, one of the first things I did when I had kids was our first child was I got a term life insurance policy. I think that every single person on the planet who has a family should have a good term life insurance policy. And it has given me a tremendous peace of mind knowing that if something happens to me, that my family is going to be taken care of. So I want to tell you about a policy by Fabric by Gerber Life. It's a term life insurance policy that you can get done today. And it's made for busy parents just like you, all online, all on your schedule, right from your couch. You can be covered in under 10 minutes with no health exam required. So if you got kids like I do, and especially if you're young and you're healthy, the time to lock in low rates is now. Fabric has policies that fit your family and your budget, like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. And they're partnered with Gerber Life, which I like because that's such a trusted brand. You know, when I had my first child, I mean, I knew it was important to protect my family in case something ever happened to me. And Fabric is great. There's a no-risk 30-day money-back guarantee. You can cancel at any time. So join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/unashamed. That's meetfabric.com/unashamed. MEET fabric.com/unashamed. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices are subject to underwriting and health questions.
And so he goes through all of that on what's going to happen. And verse 19, the people refused to listen to Samuel. No, they said, "We want a king. Then we will be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles." And that's why I wanted to read this, because especially when you get to Barabbas and Jesus, which, by the way, have the same name. Barabbas means son of the Father.
Yeah.
And here's Jesus, who's talking about his Father, his whole ministry, the Son of God. And it's like you have two representations of Israel here. You have one who has been convicted of an insurrection because he's leading a revolt. He's trying to upend this Roman authority through wars and insurrection. And then you have Jesus who's claiming this, and he's coming at it from a different angle, because he's like, my kingdom's not of this place. If it was, we would pick up weapons to fight. I mean, don't you find that fascinating? It goes all the way back to here, where they're wanting a king to fight battles with the weapons, and that's why, I have the most horses, and let's get all the wives we can, and lots of silver and gold. So, verse 21, when Samuel heard all that the people said, he repeated it before the Lord. The Lord answered and said, "Listen to them, give them a king." Then Samuel said to the Israelites, "Everyone go back to your own town." So we know what happened after that. So Saul is the first king. And it's interesting because he was tall. There's some kind of giant connection there, I think. And because they're thinking all about fighting, like other king. We want to be the greatest kingdom on earth, but they got a earthly kingdom mindset because God is their king. Won't you trust him and do what's right? But they didn't want to do it. So you fast forward, because that didn't go well with Saul, and you fast forward to 15, 1 Samuel 15, and you kind of see the demise. You can read that.
There were a series of things that happened, but the bottom line was Saul really didn't want to be the king. I mean, it was such a weird thing. It was almost like remember when the Bible talked about them trying to force Jesus to become king, and he like slipped away from him earlier when we were in John. That's kind of the story with Saul. I almost feel sorry for him because he really never wanted it, and God didn't want it, and yet the people did, and they got him for all the wrong reasons. And it just didn't work out at all. And so he winds up, having a terrible death.
So I wanted to move that story to 1 Samuel 15, 34 and 35. Now, you can read all the details on your own time, but Saul ultimately didn't trust God. And you get to 35 of 15, it says, until the day Samuel died, he did not go to see Saul again, though Samuel mourned for him. And the Lord regretted that he had made Saul king over Israel, which when you read that, don't panic. We don't really have the English words for whatever, because God didn't want to do that from the beginning. He allowed them to do it.
Yeah.
And now we're getting into this judgment type mindset where when your heart turns from God, he allows that to take place for you to learn that, no, we should have just listened to the Lord from the start. Mm-hmm. And then he also does what God does. He then, because you get to 1 Samuel 16, and now you're introduced to David becoming king. And that whole process, there's a famous verse in there that I use often. In 1 Samuel 16:7, but the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, because that's what they did with Saul.
Yeah. And Samuel did the same thing because as soon as he saw the oldest brother, who was the young strapping buck of this family, as soon as he saw him, he's like, oh, here we go.
You're correct. That's the context for this verse. Yeah. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart, which eventually leads to David being chosen. Here's a guy out, the youngest brother, and the smallest. That I looked at that Hebrew word, the smallest. Yeah. And what is he doing? Well, he's out there taking care of sheep. Yeah. Which, and I even think, we read Isaiah 11 when we were talking about this, and it's like predicting this new son of Jesse, speaking of Jesus, in that line, a king would come. It's a real interesting read after you put all this together. And all that leads us to Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, which are so much language in the Gospels being used from Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, because it's literally about Jesus setting up this kingdom on earth in the line of David. But I think you see how all of that traced its roots there. And so, and even with Jesus, not only are you getting a king, but you're getting a priest, prophet, and a king, and a judge per se, but it's representing, humans, but God himself, and he's innocent, pure in heart. You don't have to worry about this temptation of all the kingdoms. You know what I found fascinating that I hadn't thought about, Al? In Matthew 4, when Jesus is tempted, you remember when the evil one, he took him up to the high place and said, look at all the kingdoms. He was basically saying, look what I've created, which comes back to that money, sex, and power. Yeah. I'll give you all these if you'll bow down and worship me. And so I just wanted to give that as the backdrop for what's this conversation is about here.
Yeah.
The kingdom versus the kingdoms and what Jesus is representing. And I really think you see that in Jesus Barabbas and Jesus the Son of God and them picking where they want to go from here as far as a king.
No, I think you're right. And it's interesting because you said it, God established an eternal covenant, is what he called it, with David about the king, the ultimate king, when he would become flesh, when the Son of Man would come, that mark would be back to David. So from God's perspective, he was really the only king he chose. And then, of course, it goes from the lineage after that. But just to show you were right, Jase, Zach was talking about all the evil that came from the kings in Israel through their history. And by the time we get to the first century, a couple of podcasts ago, we read the little segment about Herod, who was the son of Herod the Great, but he was part of 4, I guess you could air quote and call them kings of Israel. But look at what effect they had on what was going on there politically. Nothing. Like, Pilate tried to pawn Jesus off, hoping Herod might do something about it, but he didn't even know what to do other than mock him and dress him in, a purple robe and send him back to Pilate. That just shows you the ineptitude of what happened in Israel. You talk about lack of power in a king. I mean, it got to this point, they had no power.
But then David, too, was from the tribe of Judah. And so you have the prophecy or the picture in Revelation, is it 4 or 5, where it says, "Behold, the lion from the tribe of Judah," and then he turns and he sees the lamb that looked as though it had been slain, standing. So Jesus is that figure. So he's like the new David. Or David's like a prefiguration of Jesus. One, because he was chosen to be king, and 2, he is from the tribe of Judah. So when the kingdom splits after, it's kind of debatable on that, but I would say the kingdom split after Solomon's reign, and then that the God's side of it was what side? It was Judah, all the way through, and so Israel became just wicked, and Judah was the place where that was God's people, that was God's lineage, that was the lineage that he was going to ultimately bring the king who was going to now be crucified on a cross that we're talking about right here in John 18. So the holidays are meant for giving, but that doesn't mean that you can't get a little something back as well. Between road trips to see family, hosting holiday dinners, countless grocery and gas runs, this season could put a strain on your wallet, but the free Upside app helps you earn cash back on everything that you're already doing. The free Upside app gets you cash back on daily essentials like gas, groceries, and dining. There's over 100,000 gas stations, grocery stores, restaurants, all on the Upside app, so cash back is always just around the corner, literally. And yes, it's cash back, so no confusing reward points or credits, just actual money that you can transfer straight into your bank account. You can earn 3 times more cash back with the Upside app than any other product on the market. That includes loyalty programs and credit card rewards. $1 million cash back is being earned by users every single week.
Lisa and I now travel so much, and a lot of that includes driving. And so for us, Upside, we use it mostly for gas because we spend so much on gas. And so we're saving enough up where we can have us a nice big steak dinner, just from what we save from Upside. So it's awesome.
Upside is giving back $1 billion to its users. To find out how much you could earn, download the free Upside app and use promo code UNASHAMED to get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas. That's an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas using promo code UNASHAMED.
Well, I wanted to read the Luke 23 version of this because it gives it more legs, the conversation, because you brought up Herod, but it also, I think what I just went through about a king, it makes more sense, I guess, based on reading that. So this is Luke 23 in Luke's account of where we're at, John 18. It says, "Then the whole assembly rose and led him off to Pilate, and they began to accuse him." There's that word again, which goes in with why I brought up the evil one, saying, "We have found this man subverting our nation." So there's one accusation. Here's the next one. "He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar." So now they're bringing Rome in here, and he's saying you shouldn't pay taxes because remember that conversation, give to Caesar what is Caesar, but to God what is God, and claims to be a Messiah, a king. So those were the three accusations that started off here. So Pilate asked Jesus, are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus replied, you have said so. So Pilate announced to the chief priests and the crowd, I find no basis or charge against this man. But they insisted. Here's another accusation. He stirs up the people all over Judea by his teaching, which doesn't seem like a big thing, but basically they're saying he's a terrorist. Yeah. 'Cause that's what terrorism is. He's promoting fear and among all the people.
Overthrow is what they're claiming.
He started in Galilee and has come all the way here. On hearing this, Pilate asked if the man was a Galilean. When he learned that Jesus was under Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. But you got to remember, this is the same guy, and I know why he sent him. This is the same guy who killed John the Baptist. Mm-hmm. And you're like, well, what led to that? You remember that verse in Matthew 3, I think it's verse 10, where John the Baptist is talking about repent, and the axe is at the root of the tree of Israel. And, well, that kind of language will get you killed. Because he's basically, whether you view that as Rome, which I tend to think, it's like, because Rome would eventually destroy the temple at Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. And it happened in history. And here you have this wild man predicting all this stuff. So...
by the way, he also called out Herod for marrying his sister-in-law.
Exactly.
There was that too. Yeah,
exactly. And I'm sure he had basing that off Deuteronomy 17.
Right.
Really. And so verse 8 says, when Herod saw Jesus, he was greatly pleased, because for a long time he had been wanting to see him. And before you get all giddy about it, here's why he wanted to see him. For what he had heard about him, he hoped to see him perform a sign of some sort. He wanted to see one of his magic tricks.
Yeah.
I threw that in there about the magic trick. That's not in the Bible. But
that's exactly what he was thinking, Jase. That's exactly what he was thinking.
He plied him with many questions, but Jesus gave no answer. The chief priests and the teachers of the law were standing there vehemently accusing him. Then Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked him, dressing him in an elegant robe. They sent him back to Pilate. That day, this is fascinating, Herod and Pilate became friends. Before this, they had been enemies. So in a strange way, Jesus was consolidating people, bringing people together. But I think the greater purpose of reading that is because I think it gives you a picture that all the enemies of God are being brought together to be defeated in what Jesus is fixing to accomplish.
It's interesting, the connection there. What's the old phrase? The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah.
You kind of see this a lot, even like in politics. You'll see like strange bedfellows that are actually opposed to one another, but yet their hatred for some righteous cause, they'll actually band together because their hatred for what's right is greater than their love for whatever their particular thing is. You see this play out even today, that kind of weird, strange partnership that evil does.
No, you're right. So look, then you get to verse 13. Pilate called together the chief priests, the rulers of the people, and said, you brought me this man as one who was inciting the people to rebellion. I have examined him in your presence and found no basis for your charges against him. Neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us. As you can see, he's done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I will punish him and release him. But the whole crowd shouted, away with this man, release Barabbas to us. And this is where I got that earlier when I said, where was that verse? Barabbas had been thrown into prison for an insurrection in the city and for murder. Wanting to release Jesus, Pilate appealed to them again, but they kept shouting, crucify him, crucify him. For the third time he spoke to them, why? What crime has this man committed? I have found no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore, I will have him punished and release him. But with loud shouts and insistently demanded that he be crucified, and their shouts prevailed. So Pilate decided to grant their demand. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, the one they asked for, and surrendered Jesus to their will.
No, and tried to wash his hands of it, which is really interesting because Barabbas, this is another attempt. John's account of it is a little different, a little nuanced, a little bit different, but he frames it as Pilate trying to find a way out for Jesus. I mean, he doesn't want to kill him. And we talked about this half death, which is what we'll get into in 19, which is the scourging and all that. But he's thinking that's enough. But, it shows you the power of a mob too, Jase. By now, a lot of these are the same people that were lining up the streets with the palm leaves when Jesus came into Jerusalem. And now they're so bloodthirsty because they've been whipped into this frenzy that he has to die. And it's kind of like what Zach was talking about earlier. You get these evil forces joining together, and it just creates a bloodlust. I mean, you see it now. You see like a crowd of people get behind something, and some people put the right money in there and get them stirred up, and all of a sudden they'll do things as a mob that they would never do as an individual. Yes. And I think you're seeing that present here in the storyline. And N.T. Wright made an interesting point because he talked about it, how it was like a reverse substitution. Pilate had this plan. You had this really bad guy that Rome didn't. I mean, he was a true insurrectionist. So he wasn't good for the Jews. He wasn't good for the Romans. And yet he was willing to say, I'll release him, because you get one get out of jail free card on the Passover. And let it be this guy who was an enemy to everyone, who was guilty and beyond reasonable. He had plenty of witnesses. And he said, well, I'll release him. But they said, no, we want the other one. We want the innocent one. And he was saying that that's representative of what Jesus did for all of us, that innocence and truth had to be put to death for the guilty and for the wicked, which is all of us. He says just a microcosm of exactly what Jesus did for everybody. So again, Pilate had a plan to try to subvert what was happening in the then and there, but the real plan is that Jesus came to do something far greater and far better, which is why he was sacrificed.
All right, I found that verse I was looking for. Matthew 27:24. When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. I am innocent of this man's blood. He said, it's your responsibility. And the people's response is interesting. His blood is on us and our children. If you only knew how profound that would be. And this is right after, his wife had come to him and said, look, I'm having these bad dreams about this man you have. Don't have anything to do with that innocent man. She said that word in verse 19.
Yeah, I was glad you brought that up, because that's a very intriguing little detail. John doesn't deal with that, but Matthew did. But it's really interesting that the forces of good seem to be at work here as well. I mean, why would she have this dream? Why would she have this premonition of all people?
One thing that we really hold dear on this podcast is our veteran community. My Uncle Si served, and we are really thankful for the men and the women who have served us faithfully and with honor. Here's the problem. A lot of times when they come home, they don't have the brotherhood and the support network that they had in the military. So that's where my company, my wireless company, Pure Talk, comes in. I'm so proud to be a customer of Pure Talk, not just because they have incredible service, which they do. You get talk, text, and plenty of 5G data for just $25 a month. Also, these guys are really committed, walking the walk that they talk, especially when it comes to supporting our veteran community. We really are proud to be a part of working with them. I'm telling you, choosing a wireless company has never been easier. I made the switch this year. It was super simple. It took as little as, I think I did it in less than 10 minutes. And you can make that switch today as well, helping support veterans and cutting your cell phone bill in half by going to puretalk.com/unashamed to make the switch today. Again, that's puretalk.com/unashamed to switch to America's wireless company, Pure Talk.
Yeah, and that's why I was bringing all this up, because when you just make a list, which I sat down and wrote the differences in Jesus Barabbas and Jesus the Son of Man, because Jesus constantly predicted that this was going to happen. But when he did, he would say, for the Son of Man must be handed over. I wrote those verses down if you want to look them up. But over and over, he would say that. I can't read my writing. It was really late when I wrote this down. Where's that? Jesus, so John 18, why do I have John 18:10?
Simon Peter drew the sword and struck
because that's the difference between what Barabbas represented and what Jesus, because he was here, yeah, because you brought up that spiritual, he's battling the spiritual forces of evil. Think of the book of Ephesians 6:12.
Yeah.
And he brings up in Ephesians 6:12, Paul does the spiritual forces in the heavenly realms, but he calls it the spiritual forces of darkness. And remember when in John 18:36, is John 18:36? Let's see what that is. My kingdom is not of the world. If it were, my servants would fight. So it's a contrast between the different kind of fight here that's going on.
Yeah.
So look, Luke 24:7, I'll read this. The Son of Man must be delivered over to the hands of sinners, be crucified, and on the third day be raised. But he's using that phrase from Daniel 7. There's a Son of Man coming on the clouds who's going to set up his kingdom. It all makes sense when you read all these verses. In other places, he predicted that. Matthew 17:22 and 23, Matthew 26:2, Mark 9:31. And so then you start seeing who these enemies are that he's addressing, which makes you think back to, not only was there literal darkness when he died in Luke 23:44 and Matthew 27:45, but there's a real interesting verse in Luke 22 in verse 53. Listen to this. Luke 22:53. Then seizing him, they led him away and took him into the house of the high priest. Peter followed. No, that's 54. 53, the one before. Every day I was with you in the temple courts, and you did not lay a hand on me. This is when he was arrested. But this is your hour when darkness reigns. That's the phrase I wanted to get to. What's he talking about? It's all these dark powers, which really goes back to the temptation about the evil one saying, I have all these kingdoms, bow down to me. It goes back to the money, sex, and power. We want a king like the other nations. Well, what are they doing? They're just fighting each other, trying to take over in a worldly way all other nations.
And if you think about it, Jase, like all of human history comes to this day. So like everything that had happened up to now, all the stuff we read about in the Bible, many, many things that aren't in the Bible, obviously, that happened throughout human history. This is the day. I mean, like the God has come here, and all these forces have lined up thinking they're about to defeat him by putting him to death. And people are even participating in it and not even sure why they're participating in it, but they are. And then you even have these little bit players like Pilate's wife who's like, oh, no, stay away from this guy. And even in John 19, it says in verse 8, Pilate heard this when they said he was a son of God. To your point, that they said he claims to be the son of God. Well, Pilate heard this. He was even more afraid. Mm-hmm. So you understand, like even Pilate now, he is fearful. He knows that
that's a good point because
something huge is happening here. Yeah,
because we said earlier that Pilate wasn't taking him serious, but But we see that at some point he does take him serious because he's
That's
like, whatever's going on here is beyond me. And I think that probably too was. I mean, can you imagine though, just the presence of Christ?
Yeah.
I mean, just that alone, like just you're like, regardless of any evidence, regardless of anything else, like the presence of the physical Christ had to have just carried some kind of crazy power that he just felt it and knew it and was like, this guy, surely this guy's the Son of God. There's something going on here. And I think that's why when you look at these verses, like about what you'd mentioned about the Son of Man must be handed over. I think Luke 24 has a passage that says something similar, that the Son of Man must be handed over and then resurrected and ascend. I think it actually may even have the ascension in there. And that goes back to this idea of the kingdom is coming with power. He says that the kingdom's going to come in power. And I truly believe the fullness of that power, not the fullness of it, but when the Spirit came on Pentecost after Jesus was resurrected and ascended, that's when like it was like, oh wow, something new, like really new has solidified here. And so this is kind of in that vein of what's happening is what Christ is. He's in the presence here, and you're like, there's something about this guy and whatever he's bringing that is, it's a power that we don't fully understand or know what it is.
Exactly. The reason I wanted to read all those where he said when Jesus would predict that he'd be handed over, because that is this idea. Remember when we went through all that about drinking the cup and all of this history in the Old Testament where God would allow another nation to conquer another nation in under the guise of judgment being pronounced. And so now you see what's fixing to happen, because Jesus wasn't just saying, "Oh, I'm going to die. I'm going to be handed over. I'm going to be killed. I'm going to be crucified." He was making specific charges that would take place that would show the path to victory, which was the exact opposite of what Barabbas was trying to do. It's like you see two paths of victory. Do you want to go earthly with fighting and war and money, sex, and power, and then handing it down to the next generation who all of a sudden they're corrupt, and it's just a problem. The whole system is a epic fail. Mm-hmm. And then you see Jesus's path to victory, which is more of a cosmic spiritual war, defeating all the powers that contributed to this being your way to victory. And that's what I find fascinating. And I was going to bring up, it goes back to what some of the things he predicted, like in Luke 17, when they were asking him about when the kingdom would come. This is 20 and 21. Once on being asked by the Pharisees when the kingdom of God would come, Jesus replied, "The coming of the kingdom of God is not something you can observe," because they're wanting this physical war. Nor will people say, "Here it is," or "There it is," because the kingdom of God is in your midst, or another translation of that is among you. It's among you. What I've passed on to you, which I think is a picture of being spirit-filled and spirit-led people. And so then even in Luke 21, when he pronounces this judgment on Israel, which is leading to what I read in Luke 23 about this, him being arrested and all the dialogue with that, and Herod and Pilate coming together. Just listen to this, 21:5. Some of his disciples were remarking about how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones and with the gifts dedicated to God. But Jesus said, "As for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown down." They're like, "Well, when is this going to happen? I mean, what? How can this be?" And look at verse 10. Then he said to them, "Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom." So what's he talking about? Verse 12. But before all this, they will seize you and persecute you. They will hand you over to the synagogues and put you in prison. So he's kind of putting it in their lifespan, which goes along with Mark 9:1 when he said, no one will taste death. Some of you are standing here will not taste death before you see the kingdom of God come with power. But then when you get to 21:20, it says, when you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you will know that the desolation is near. So you see this prediction of what he's saying about what's going to happen to the temple of Jerusalem. But at the same time, he's representing the temple. He's keeping God's people in a kingdom that cannot be destroyed, because by this time, he's going to be on the throne in heaven as King of Kings, conquering all the enemies, including death itself, and giving people a place to go, which is in him, that cannot be destroyed, which goes back to Daniel 2 and Daniel 7.
No, and I couldn't help but think about, we're out of time, but I couldn't help but think about that Roman guard, remember, at the foot of the cross when everything happened at the moment when he dies, and he says, surely this man was the Son of God, which is interesting because what he didn't know no, he is the Son of God, because he's going to be back in 3 days. So yeah, but we'll pick up the narrative next time on Unashamed.
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube. And be sure to click the little bell and choose all notifications to watch every episode.